This joke is not my own. What's an Irish boomerang? It doesn't come back. It just sings songs about coming back. We're very good at singing songs about our loneliness, about our homesickness, about our sadness. But there's one thing that Irish people aren't always that good at. And in this episode, that's what we're going to explore. Ladies and gentlemen, Kadini Bukati, my dear, kind, loyal listeners, welcome to Healing from Irishness. Today, I'm going to be talking about the subject that's in many circles kind of taboo, especially in Irish circles: happiness. Hello, everyone. So, happiness, I think, can have a little bit of a funny reputation. I think a lot of the time we associate happiness with maybe the world of children, not the world of adults. And that we grown-ups, we need to be serious, we need to be purposeful, we need to be engaged in life making. But I feel for Irish people, and especially considering our past and what we carry in the present connected to the past, that we coming back to happiness and really understanding happiness and prioritizing happiness can really be a way of falling back in love with life and falling back in love with yourself if you ever have been in love with yourself. So in this little episode, I'm just going to talk about happiness and give you a little sense, a guide of how to be happy. I think the first thing we need to be aware of here is that it is an inside job. Um, and I think you have to just abandon all hope of happiness being connected to something outside of you. You know, we are led to believe from the youngest of ages that happiness is a home. Happiness is a load of money. Happiness is the right partner. And these things do make us happy, but they only make us happy as a kind of a symptom. We have to come back to the root of it all. And this is inside of you. And we all know ourselves that you can fall in love and it's the most satisfying experience of your life, but then it quickly turns into the most miserable thing too. Same thing with homes and stuff. We feel like this immense sense of safety and joy around a home, and then that home becomes the prison that binds us for the rest of our life. The same with work. So our happiness has to be independent of our external reality, and our happiness has to be something that exists right now, that it's not causal. So even just as you're listening to this, you can kind of you can even just do a little experiment and sort of be aware that can I find happiness in my body that is spontaneously arising, not connected to any external forces? Because this is the only true happiness. It's a kind of a sort of an arising, a phenomenon that arises from just a sense of peace with all things, the good or the bad. I remember a situation. I remember having a very strong situation. I think I was about 18, and I was a real crusty. And I was off traveling the world, and I was hitching around the world and working in circuses and busking on streets and shoplifting and making my way around. And I found myself in Mexico. And at that time, there was no online banking. And I remember I would call my mom I don't know, every week or 2 weeks, and she'd give me a little update on how much money was in my bank. and I called her from Mexico, and she informed me that I had no money left. And I remember, um, I remember just walking to the beach and having this strange sense of bliss, which I would love to be able to recreate because I think if I discovered I had no money now, I wouldn't be in a place of bliss. But it was this deeply independent sense of happiness that just arose inside of me from a knowledge that I liked me. Somehow I liked me. I was okay with me. And this is what we need to sort of have as our North Star when it comes to exploring happiness. That your happiness has to be just an ease with yourself and an ease with presence. And in order to kind of connect to this type of happiness, it's very important that you do everything you're doing at a much slower pace. It's a little bit like if you could imagine life as a meal, right? And not to get too Forrest Gumpy on you here, but I grew up in a house where we kind of just wolfed down our food, right? We ate like dogs around a shared bowl, and there was very little happiness in that. It was a real just a response to. It felt like a response to stress. You would just like demolish this food. And you'll notice in times in your life when you have really eaten slowly and appreciated the food. And I think there's an element of like these, these small dish menu places, we're just trying to create this sense of slowness in how we eat. If you can imagine that you're moving through life with the same slowness, trying to savor your life, because this is how we create a reserve of happiness deep inside ourselves that's independent of anything on the outside. The next step is really just reduction. Um, the there's so much noise in this life of ours. There's so much noise in this world of ours, and the more we listen to it, the further away it takes us from happiness. When we are bombarded with news or information, or I know myself that I can often get obsessed with learning, you know? And there's this new thing, or I'm reading a new book on this. And what I find is that it's often just a lot of noise. It's not true happiness. And so it's really important that we can just begin to reduce the unnecessary noise in our lives. And this is often just beginning to become aware of what's going on under the lid, especially in your thoughts. We have these minds that are constantly analyzing and comparing and worrying and replaying things, and they're creating tension. So much of the tension that we encounter in the world is really just the tension that we are radiating. When you run into someone, and you don't have to be very sensitive to get this, but when you run into someone who just carries this weight of tension. I remember growing up in Sands at the village where I grew up in, and there was a woman, a widow, and my God, she was just this emaciated woman, and the village was just so full of characters. I remember this, and everyone was. We didn't really have cars so much then, or there weren't many, so everyone was just walking around the place all the time, and you'd see them. And this woman just kind of radiated. And it was grief and it was stress. It was the stress of being a single mother in the 80s and trying to raise, I think she had three boys after her husband had died. But the tension that she carried in her body was so much that I remember I would see her coming across the bridge, coming across the Brown Canal, and I'd walk to the other side of the road. And of course, this would have filled me full of guilt because my mother raised me to say hello to everyone, everyone we knew, and I would already be jumping across the street and pretending that I was lost in my own world. But you can understand this, how we can carry so much tension inside ourselves. And just becoming aware of the amount of tension that you're carrying is a very useful way of recognizing, this is why happiness is not spontaneously arising, because it can't arise amidst all this tension. So just becoming aware of the noise around you, the noise inside you, and trying to reduce it. My favorite thing to do is to start a week with no plans for the entire week. And you might listen and you go, well, Jesus, that's all well and good for you, Connor. You don't really have a job. You just talk into microphones every so often. And people very generously support you in that endeavor. But it wasn't always this way. I can remember a stage in my life where I would wake up in the morning and write a to-do list. And then I would go to sleep and write a to-do list. And the to-do list, I would place it by my bed as if somehow that the the planning would blend with my dreams, that I could somehow I could multitask in my sleep. I was so uh, connected to ambition and so connected to planning. So one of the most luxurious things I think you can do in order to ensure your happiness is to have days without plans, to reduce the noise, to reduce the constant tasks. The next thing that I think is very important in your pursuit of happiness is to begin to just reduce importance. Now, this might sound defeatist in a way, but it's actually, think of it from the point of view of someone who is deeply confident, um, someone who knows their worth, um, doesn't have a poor relationship with themselves, and takes care of themselves. What they would do um, is they would move through life with a sense of flow, a sense of calm. They would recognize that things come to them and things go away. And they would understand in all of it that their innate qualities are permanent. And so this would mean that when they go out on a limb, if a friend comes and a friend goes, if they take a risk in business, they take a risk in love, they know that their innate quality, the level that they function at isn't damaged by this. It doesn't go away. It's not dependent on external things. So the more you can recognize the moments when you are amplifying importance, when you're assigning too much importance to things, you know that this is a surefire way of damaging your happiness. The thing that we're trying to explore here on Earth is we're trying to expose really our immense power. Part of the game of life is that we come here with a divine spark inside our body. Now, I'm not speaking religiously there. I'm simply saying that we are connected to all things. We are connected to all parts of creation, and everything that we do has a sympathetic relationship with everything that can possibly be done. So your very simple breath, your very simple steps affect everything on this planet. Your relationship with your heart right now really alters and affects our the whole of mankind's relationship with our heart. This is the beautiful dependent origination of life here, is that we are all deeply interconnected. And because of that, because of this sort of um, what you could call it like a kind of a fact that's hard to grasp, but that at a deeper level we understand. Um, our work here in life is to behave as such, right? If you knew that you were as important as everything, and if you had the same creative powers as nature flowing through your body, then you wouldn't sweat about the little things. You would allow things to come and go. You would know, you would know because you would feel the deep, deep legacy, the deep um, patterning that lie inside you. I think like much of our work here in life is to realize that we are the children of kings, right? That this whole empire, this whole planet belongs to us. And our work is really just to remember that and to stop playing small. And when you remember that, it becomes much easier to not place pressure on things. So something comes, something goes, it doesn't matter. You know that you are connected to the greatest imaginative force possible, the same force that created Earth, that created life, and that created every piece of nature and every phenomenal piece of art and discovery. That same energy is inside of you. You call it like the same chip is inside of you. You have those same capabilities. And the more you can trust that, the easier things go. I have a friend who comes from so much money and has just this very natural relationship with money that is so beautiful to watch, in that he can lose a lot and gain a lot and lose a lot and gain a lot. And he doesn't take it seriously, or he doesn't suffer, because he just knows that he has this fantastic relationship with money, a fantastic relationship with money that he's inherited from his family. And so he just moves through life with this great sense of stability, that nothing is so important. Um, and if we can do this, when you can begin to reduce the pressure, again, and so much of happiness and so much of what I'm talking about here with happiness is just the removing the things that would block the flow of happiness. Because happiness is just this naturally occurring thing when we are at peace. So by reducing the importance, so what if you lose the job? So what if your partner goes away? So what if your body grows old and you can no longer run a kilometer in 5 minutes? You know, it's fine. There is a deep core of resilience inside of you. There is magic inside of you. You came here to experience all these levels. Drop importance and remove the pressure, and just allow the happiness, the natural happiness, to flourish in the background. Yeah, and speaking of the background, the next thing that I think is really important for happiness to flourish is to just become a little bit more ordinary. Um, and that really just means exploring a little bit more of the simplicities of life. We can sometimes get um, completely drowned by our own ambitions, and so much of our ambitions are connected to the lack of love we had as kids. We want to be seen. We want to prove our worth. We want to be validated. But there is great joy. Jiddu Krishnamurti used to say this. He used to say there's great joy in not wanting anything and not going anywhere and not becoming anything. And it's this idea that you can revel in the ordinary. You can allow yourself to just have an ordinary life, an ordinary simple life. And again, all of this is connected to all of these things are connected to each other. So much of it is the slowness, so much of it is the reducing of all the noise, all the planning. This and it's a message that is not really expressed so much in our society. We feel that our worth is really connected to what we do, what we manage to create. But what if your worth was simply your state of being? What if your worth was just the simple, ordinary level of calm that you maintain, that state of ordinariness and calm? And what if that was the gift that you bring to the world? And I think there's a great peace that we can experience when we stop trying so hard. And conversely, and this is something I've noticed a lot with my own work, is the less I do, the more I actually get done. And it feels like much of the doing is kind of coming from a compensatory place. But when I do less and when I actually just allow my life to be ordinary and spend a little bit more time out looking for vegetables, or spend a little bit more time out walking the dog, or spend an extra few minutes just sort of watering the plants in the morning, or being in nature, all of these things tend to be a magnet for success for me in a way that I had never imagined. So the more I can kind of create space for just ordinary, slow, simple moments in my life, um, the more that actually comes to me. So there's something there about doing this thing where really like embracing the ordinary in your own life. And there's often a lot of fears around that because we have such huge desires to be special, extraordinary, where we almost come into this life as though we've been blasted from a pistol with the express purpose of you need to be the best. But there's a lovely, it's a lovely way to access happiness by just giving yourself the chance to enjoy and be ordinary. And yeah, and the last thing I think that is really important for me in this is just to spend your time with people who are also happy. We can often just find ourselves in the company so often of like people who are very negative, or people who are mm, caught up in drama a lot of the time. But there is happiness is infectious, and happiness, we can learn it together. So just spending your time with those who are deeply enthusiastic, people who are moving towards joy, cultivating joy and enthusiasm, because we learn from them. We attune to them in the same way that when you meet someone who is stressed and negative, you end up like you join them at their level unless you're very careful. So in the same way, the more we can begin to open up to spending our time with people who are very ordinarily and very simply happy, there's great beauty in that. There's great peace in that, and we can learn from them. So yeah, in kind of summary, I think it's really important just to remember that happiness is kind of a natural condition. And once you remove all the unnatural conditions, happiness just flourishes. It's not something, and we're brainwashed from the youngest of ages to believe that happiness is something outside of us. Happiness is when you meet the right person. Happiness is when you have a sufficient amount of money in your bank account. But we know this to not be true. Happiness is just a state that arises when we take our attention back into ourselves, when we stop complicating our lives, when we stop getting lost in worthless ambition, when we stop paying attention to all the negativity. What happens when we clear? I have a piece of land in Mallorca. I bought like a kind of a forest in the middle of the island, and I notice that whenever I remove like swathes of, I have a lot of these wild olive trees that don't fruit, and they've kind of just proliferated a lot. And I notice when I have like a fit of energy and I go and I remove a lot of them, what happens about a month later is that the land is covered in flowers. So, and I haven't planted any of those flowers. I haven't put seeds there. They just appear, right? So there's something about this. Your happiness will appear when you remove the obstacles to happiness. Um, and that to me brings a lot of peace. Sort of when I look at the little piece of land that I have, I know that flowers are the natural state of that land. Beautiful, fresh flowers are the natural state. And these invasive olive bushes are not. And when they're removed, all that I see in front of me on this little piece of land are just flowers everywhere. And that's the same in our lives when we begin to remove the negative conditioning, the programming, all the lies that society has taught us. And especially for us Irish people, we are so full of stories that have been basically survival strategies. This is how you get by. You don't, you become tough. You drown out your feelings. You suppress. These are all the stories that have kind of fitted into our survival narrative, but they're no longer necessary. Your happiness is a naturally occurring condition when you remove the parts of you that have been inauthentically inserted into your consciousness, into your way of being. So that's it. I feel happiness is so important and so often overlooked. So often we think of it as not that important. But happiness is such a strength to be able to just connect to this feeling of peace and happiness and simplicity, and to have a kind of a voice inside of ourselves that says everything is okay. Yeah, that's all I want to talk about today. Thank you for listening. Um, I have one-on-one sessions open in the month of March if you want to come talk to me. There's courses on my website. I have a Patreon where we sort of deep dive into more coaching stuff and really how to be yourself. In the summer, I'm going to be doing a tour. Details of that will be coming soon. I'm calling it a world tour, but the world tour will probably just involve Ireland. And there may be some other locations. But thank you for listening. Thank you for giving me your time. Slán. Take care. Love yous. Bye bye.